you for listening to the NorthStar Narrative, a podcast by NorthStar Academy. I hope you're encouraged, challenged, and motivated by what you learned today. Enjoy the story. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. We have Joe Hale here with us, and he is the founder and president of the Network of International Christian Schools. I have had the privilege to work with Joe for over 13 years now. He is a true visionary, and he has a passion for God's kingdom, and he has been doing kingdom work for over 37 years now. When God called him, he did not hesitate, and he just said yes. So I'm so excited for you to hear his story today. He's been going strong ever since God gave him the dream, and he has just remained steadfast to that purpose that God has given him. Right now, the Network of International Christian Schools has 15 schools in 13 different nations, serving over 5,000 students. Joe, I want you to know that I could not imagine doing anything else than working here in this ministry. And it truly has been a privilege and an honor and a dream. And just want you to know that you inspire me. And I thank you so much for coming on the show today to tell us a little bit about your story. So let's step back a little bit in time and tell me what it was like for you growing up. Did you have any desire to do education or missions?
No, actually, I grew up in a very poor family, and I came to know the Lord when I was 10 years old. And because of my background, I just really couldn't see doing anything in ministry, and struggled a lot with my own self-esteem and those kinds of things. And then when I went to university, I went to Liberty University up in Virginia. And God did a lot of things in my life while I was there. But one of the things that he did, he really gave me a confidence that if I would really trust him, he could do great things. And so I was a senior in college when I went on a missions trip to 4 countries in Asia. And while we were on that trip, God really clearly spoke to me about what I was supposed to do with my life. Of course, as God directs, he does that step by step. And I didn't have any idea of how it would totally unfold. But I just knew the next step for me was to return to Korea and serve him as a missionary there. I was single at that time, so I came back and I told the gal I'd been dating that I would like to marry her, and if she was willing, that we would be going on a long honeymoon one way to Asia. And she basically responded that, if God calls me to you, then God calls me to go wherever he leads you to go. And so Ann and I got married and returned and went to Korea. And God blessed us with 4 children. And when our oldest son got school age, we looked into every option for schooling we knew of, and just really couldn't find a good option for us. So really, NICS got started, I want to say by accident, but we know that in God's economy, there are no accidents. And so we started the first school really for our own children, out of a desperate move to not have to leave the field because of our children's education. That's one of the things I love about NorthStar. NorthStar allows so many families to be able to serve overseas without the school being a major hindrance to them being able to do that. So I'm very excited about NorthStar being a part of this network as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Ann, I know Ann very well too, very sweet lady, and she has some awesome stories about raising the four boys. Joe's got 4 sons, and just want to mention this while it's on my mind, but one of his sons, so I was sitting at a table last week with Joe and one of his sons, and it was so awesome to hear him say, "Dad, you were always present. You were never an absent father." So you're going to hear this great story about how this ministry started and how it's gotten so big and just amazing, but just know that Joe was always there and a present dad. So that's just really cool to me. So what was it like starting out? How did you remain a present dad at all times so that your sons would be able to say that today?
I have this little feeling of guilt when you say at all times, because we all know there are times when, that are different from the norm. But Ann and I decided early that if God was going to give us children, then they were a gift from God to our family, and we would not neglect our own children for the sake of the ministry. That we would include them in what we do, that we would explain to them constantly what we're doing, that we would never pressure them to go into the ministry. And so that's why I'm so blessed that 3 out of my 4 sons work for this ministry. And the 4th one really loves the Lord and is a wonderful young man as well. But I made it a point that when I was home, even though I was pastoring and doing a lot of traveling and doing a lot of other things, that at least 5 nights a week I would be home. And so we really committed to that. In the early days of the ministry, the hardest times is, I used to come back to the States every February and spend a whole month trying to recruit teachers. And I traveled from East Coast to West Coast and everywhere I could go, and met myself coming, because there were just no other options. And that was part of the dream when God gave us the vision for the network, is that we could have full-time recruiters that recruited as their regular jobs, so it wouldn't require people to leave the field, to have to come home for long periods of time like that, to be apart from their families.
Just while listening to you, when you said traveling around, I just wondered, I just wrote down, have you ever counted up how many times you've been on an airplane? How many flights what would be a guess from
Hundreds.
the time you first set foot into Korea?
Hundreds. But people think, because of the nature of what we do, that even now that I stay gone all the time. It's really not true. The way I like to travel is I go about 4 or 5 times a year, usually about 2 weeks at a time. And people don't like to travel with me, because when I travel, I like to stop in 5 different countries, go to several different places, hit the ground running and get a lot done, get on the plane and head to the next place. I would rather do that than take 5 separate trips. And so people tend to not like to travel with me.
Well, I like traveling with him. He was very kind to me. So one time we were at one of the schools over in Mexico, and first time ever, I've traveled a lot, that I got sick. And we were on the way home, and Joe was so nice to me. He gave me his first class seat and just really made sure I was doing okay. I wasn't good, but so he's actually an awesome traveling companion.
Well, don't give the impression that I travel first class, because I do travel so much that I get a lot of upgrades because of my mileage. But yeah, that was a very small thing to do because you were pretty sick.
Yeah. So there are some ups and downs, and I'm sure we'll get to that. Just thinking I know there's been so many ups, but just looking back on this long journey, what is the best thing you would say maybe ever happened to you, Ann, and the boys through all of this?
Very, very difficult to point to one event, because honestly, God has given us so many times where there was just no way that what we were trusting Him for could possibly happen in the human arena. And we just had to trust God for some miraculous things. I know that one of the things that's kind of a highlight for me is I got told by more people than one that there could never be a Christian school established in Thailand. And so when we were establishing that school, even the Christian workers that were there basically said, it's just not likely at all. And the way God worked it is we had a wonderful Thai family in our school in Korea. And the father was just a wonderful man who's become a dear friend of mine. It's a Buddhist family, and to this point, he's still a Buddhist gentleman. And he came to me one day and he said, my 2 sons are in your school. And he said, this Christian school is just the best thing that ever has happened to my family. My boys used to hate school, and they didn't want to go to school. They didn't like their teachers. And since they've been in your school, he said, by the way, my oldest son just got accepted into the aviation program at Southern Illinois University. He said, it's all because of your school. And he just kept raving. And he said, you need to come and start a school like this in Thailand. And I said, well, can you help me do that? And this was our first endeavor outside of Korea. And so he asked me to come for a visit after they got moved back to Thailand. And I arrived in Thailand, and someone met me at the door of the airplane when I was getting off of it in a military uniform and said, are you Mr. Hale? And I said, yes. And he escorted me right through the diplomat's line and customs. And I'm like, I'm not used to this. What's going on? Put me into a car with flags on the bumper and past all the traffic is just kind of moving aside. He said, get cleaned up. It was a long trip. I said, get cleaned up and get ready. We have a meeting with the permanent Secretary of Education this afternoon. And I said, oh. So to walk into that room and meet the highest person in the country in education, and to have a Buddhist friend, this 3-star general, sitting beside me, talking, I didn't hardly say a word, but he was telling this minister of education how wonderful our school in Korea was. And he said, so many brains are being drained from Thailand to go to schools in other places. We need a school like this in our country. And so he sat there and gave his own personal testimony of the success of his children in our school in Korea as the reason that we should have a school like this in Bangkok. And with the help of that permanent Secretary of Education and the hard work of a lot of people, within a few months, this little group of Christian workers that was hoping to someday have a school and feeling like it can never happen in this country, all of a sudden realized that we were getting a permit to have a school like that in Thailand. And it was just pretty amazing. But the truth is, Stephanie, we have story after story after story where, God just did a miraculous thing time after time after time. And it never prepares you totally for what's next. But at the same time, it gives you confidence that when you look back, that when you look forward to a mountain that just looks like it can't be climbed, that you look back and you say, oh yes, God is always faithful. And so as we press forward and see God continue to do an amazing work through this ministry, I don't have all the answers, but God does, and he's always faithful.
That's good. Well, Joe likes to say, pray hard, trust big, right?
Pray hard, trust big.
And that's what he has done since the beginning. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit. So you found yourself in Korea. You did not go there to start a school, but now you are starting a school. How do you even do that? What qualifications did you have to start a school?
Well, I tell people kind of jokingly that, education and missions is what my whole life is about. And they say, well, what did you major in? And I said, neither education nor missions. I was a pastoral major. And honestly, I think the secret is to have a vision that's not about education and it's not about a specific thing. It's about kids and it's about God. And let God take that vision and use you to see a major impact on the world for Christ. And when we do that, he brings people who are the experts into the picture. And maybe they're not the visionary, they're the educator. So we need each other. So I keep making them uncomfortable, and they keep keeping me earthbound. And so it's a good balance. That the body of Christ is just like that. God has gifted me in a certain way. It doesn't make me bigger or better than anyone else, but God has given me a gift to be a visionary. I really believe that comes from Him. That gift belongs to Him, and I need to be a good steward of that. But the truth is, most of the people that God used in history are not people that were well qualified for that particular job. And I kind of fit that category because we're seeing God do some amazing things. And if I was relying on my credentials, we would all be in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. And that's how I think Joe operates. If it was something Joe could accomplish on his own, then it wouldn't even be worth doing. That
That's
you
right.
want to do something that only God can do.
Yeah.
So you found yourself there. You're not really qualified, but you said, we're going to jump out and do it. So what were the very beginning days like?
Well, the first thing was find a school teacher. And so my wife's cousin was a school teacher up in Iowa who really grew up in a one-room school. So she knew exactly how that works. So she took that first little group of 8 missionary kids, and they were from kindergarten through 9th grade, spread out all over the place. 1 or 2 of them were special needs kids. And so she took those 8 kids and just did what she does. She loved on those kids and taught them how to help each other. And, I was kind of saying, now I can get back to the main ministry that God's called me to do. Of course, I was defining what that should be, And so I thought, okay, we've got a teacher now. And then the calls started to come. And people started to come by with their children saying, I've heard you've got a school, and I've got kids, and I want to put them in the school. And we're kind of saying, wait. We've got one teacher. She's got a full load right now with these 8 kids spread out all over the age range. And so I found 2 other gals who could be teachers. And I thought, okay, now I can get back to the main thing that God called me to do, which is youth ministry and evangelism and discipleship and those things. And then we officially opened up school with 3 teachers, and we really thought we would have 30 students. First, this lady taught 8 kids just in a room, and then we said, if we're going to have a school, we need to get a permit. So we got a permit from the Korean government, and we planned. I remember our first year said we're planning on 30 students, and we thought, each teacher would have 10 students, and we would split them a little bit closer to their age ranges. And on the first day of school, about 30 students were pre-enrolled, but on the first day of school, 83 kids showed up. And so I was scrambling, and I couldn't get back to what I was determining was the main thing.
Yeah.
And the whole time God was trying to say, Joe, just open your eyes and look what I'm doing. And the whole time I saw it as a temporary thing that I just needed to get going so I could get back to the main thing. And the truth is God was making the schooling the main thing. And so that first year we had 83 students, and a good number of those kids came to know Christ as their Savior at school, led to Christ by their teachers. At that time, Christian schools didn't normally accept kids from non-Christian families, but I didn't know all the rules. And so we just took them in, and we just thought, this is an opportunity for us to influence kids and tell kids about Christ. We don't use the classroom to, try to pressure kids to become Christians at all. But they do just naturally when they hear the good news of Jesus Christ. And so the second year we went from 83 to 160, and the next year it went to 220, and then 280, and then 320, and it just kept growing, and I was kind of exhausted saying, God, when can I get back to the main thing? And clearly God said, this is the main thing, Joe. And so we began to kind of redirect our thinking to what God was doing rather than what we were trying to force to happen. And it's still the main thing. It just continues to grow and grow.
So what was that moment like when that was it? You realized, hey, I'm not coming over here to do what I thought I was going to do. And you surrendered and just said, okay, God, this is it.
Yeah, it was an exciting thing, and I pulled the team together. And because what God really began to give me a vision for was not so much doing, school is now my ministry, but God gave me a vision through the schooling that, that this is a method that could be used around the world as a way that was basically self-supporting, that could quickly mobilize people and get them out into the harvest, and it could be done rather quickly. What we saw happening in Korea could happen elsewhere. So it wasn't long between starting the first school that we began to think about a network. What would it be like to have schools like this all around the world that weren't just standalone schools, but work together as a network? Yeah. And the ideas just started to flow like a flock of blackbirds, and they still are flowing like that.
So how did you stick with 3 teachers for the 83 kids, or did you immediately get more teachers?
No, we found 2 more teachers who were already in country, who said that they would help us just to get through the year. So we had 5 teachers with 83 students.
And today you have over 900 teachers, right?
Correct.
And so do you have any idea how many teachers have gone through? How many students have gone through in 37 years, and how many teachers?
I do not know. It's literally thousands and thousands of students, and at least a few thousand teachers through the years that have come and gone. Our teachers don't always come to say, I'm going to serve overseas for life. But we ask for an initial 2-year commitment, and our average length of stay is about 5 years. So people come and go, but I think most of them would tell you that their time overseas changed their lives forever.
And many the students sometimes come back to work at the schools, right? Whether it's
They
a teacher
do.
or something else.
And not only that, we're starting to see more and more teachers, when they leave us, come back and just somehow they just don't have the fulfillment that they had teaching overseas. They might come back for a few years to take care of an aging parent or something like that, and then they come back and serve again. And we're also having a lot of teachers that have said, I've been in Korea for 10 years. I'd like to see some other part of the world too. So they stay with the network and transfer internally to some other place that they would like to venture to.
So what was it like? You had your first school, started thinking about the network. Did it get easier every time you were going to start a new school?
No.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It's never easier because it's like every new country is a whole new set of rules. So it used to be that we could go into most any country, easily get a license, easily get registered, get a big house, and just start a school in a big house. We used to really depend on donations to do that. So we would put out in our newsletter the next project that we were wanting to do, try to raise funds for it. We would get anywhere from $50,000 to, I think the maximum we ever raised was $200,000. But you could go to most countries with that kind of money and at least start small. But what we're finding now is that the for-profit education world is kind of storming this international school market, and they're coming in with their pockets full of cash, and they'll buy 20 acres and build a whole new campus and then open. So we're down the street, struggling with just our natural growth. We just don't have the investment capital that these groups have. So we're really thinking about our future right now and seeing if we can find some way to approach what we're doing in a little bit more competitive way with what our competitors are doing right now, which is going to mean that we're going to be needing to find Christian businessmen who can invest in what we're doing, not just give donations to it. So right now we're really kind of dependent on both.
So what would you say to someone that might be listening right now and they're thinking that they might want to invest? How would that work? Who do they contact?
Well, my office right now, because we are not fully equipped at this point or fully staffed with folks who are helping us with these things. That's where we're headed. But at the same time, right now, we're in the formative years of learning how to do this and to do it well. So in the meantime, like for our project in Kuala Lumpur, it's the first project that we've kind of set up this way. It's not because we're all of a sudden going into making profits, but we registered the school as a for-profit so that when it does get to a place where it can generate income, the people who have invested in it can get a return on that income, and we can pay back the folks that have loaned money for that particular project. Because the donations just don't cut it anymore. We're thankful for them, but when you have to go into a project with $20 million, at least our ability to raise that in donations is just close to zero or below zero. So, we're growing and we're learning how to do this. But right now, for instance, there's a local doctor couple, both of them are medical doctors, retired. They heard about our project in Kuala Lumpur and they said, this is not millions, but we have X amount of dollars that we would like to invest. And once the project becomes successful, if you can return it, then we'll be grateful. But that's something that we could do to help right now. And they did that. And of course, when the school gets strong, we'll be able to pay that back to them. So, there's some individuals that can help with that. And then there are others who have monies invested in foundations and private equity and those kinds of things that have the ability to redirect those investments our way if they know what our needs are.
So the Kuala Lumpur school, I haven't been there yet, but I heard it's amazing and just really state of the art. Tell us a little bit about your first school in Korea and now the difference in Kuala Lumpur. How have you seen just everything change, the way you do education?
The truth is, it's almost every school that we've started. The school in Kuala Lumpur is different in that when we used to start schools, we just started small. We didn't have much money, so we started small. What we know how to do is build a school from nothing and over 20 years make that school into the best school in the city. We save our pennies, we conservatively spend our money, we have a good quality school, but the customers come and look at it and it doesn't look like a great school. It looks like 5 houses in a row or something like that, that wasn't even built to be a school. So what we have done in our past is that, and there's no shame in that. I mean, that's how our whole network was built. But our approach was with Kuala Lumpur, because we still didn't have the investment funds, we found a major developer in Kuala Lumpur who really wanted an international school, a top-level international school on their development, because frankly it sells houses. And that's what they're really there to do, is to sell their houses. So we got them to build us a school by our specs for 650 students. We have never attempted to start big like that. And this school eventually, without moving, can accommodate around 1,200 students with the buildings that will be built in the future according to the present plans. And so, we started with 95 students. So when these for-profit companies do this, they know they're going to take a loss for 6 or 7 years. We have no way to take a loss. We got to make everything break even as a nonprofit. And so, it's been a real stretch for us and also exciting to see God provide all along our journey. We still don't own that campus. That would take about $20 million. But at the same time, we're able to fully run the school in every way. Their partnership is only as a landlord. And so, we would love to be able to actually purchase that campus ourselves and have more control of those things, because it's really a financial strain at first. And I don't really know what we're going to do next month. But God does. And so far, He has faithfully provided every single step of the way. So we started with 95 students, then we were up to 150. We ended the first year at 170. Now we have about 240 kids in the school. At 350, which we're hoping to hit next school year, that will be our break-even point. And then from 350 to 650 is when things really start to happen financially, so that we can, really do some good stuff, including paying off, what folks have loaned us.
And the goal being too to feed back in some of these other schools that need help, right?
Yeah. So if you register it as a for-profit, then when it gets to a point where it starts to make profit, you just have to, you have to report how much profit you made. You have to pay taxes on that, and then the rest of it belongs to us. Where with the nonprofit, in a lot of cases, that money can't ever leave that school, or that country. And so with it being a for-profit, when it gets to the place where it can start to make profits, we have the freedom then, if we want to send that profit across the ocean to a new school in Africa or somewhere else, we'll have the freedom to do that. So it just gives us a lot more freedom with the money by establishing it that way.
All right, let's talk about the heart of the schools. So we know from the very beginning it was the teachers that make the school run, right? The ones that are there on the campus, get to talk to the students every day and share Christ. So tell us what it's like to be a teacher, and then the types of teachers you're looking for to be in the NICS schools.
Yeah, when a lot of the teacher recruiting was on me, I came back to the States and kind of went all over the place talking to teachers constantly. And what I found is, this is not true of every teacher, but generally speaking, I found that Christian teachers who were teaching in Christian schools quite often felt like they had the total freedom to share their faith to kids who've already heard the gospel 100 times or 1,000 times. And to try to present the gospel in some new creative way is just quite challenging to a group of kids that basically already have heard the story time and time again. And then there was another group that I talked to, which were Christian teachers that were in public schools, committed Christian teachers that mostly told me that for the most part they have to leave their faith at the door when they go to work every day, or put their job in jeopardy. That they had the mission field in front of them every day, but no freedom to share it. But what a lot of teachers have described their experience being in our schools, because we have open enrollment, and we have not only Christian kids, but usually the Christian kids are the smaller group, but we have kids that come from all over the world, which means they come from every kind of religion you can imagine. So we have Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and everything that's out there, we get it. And we welcome those kids. We want them in our school. And so what it does for a teacher, it allows them to have not only the mission field in regard to the unsaved in their classrooms, but these are people that don't know the Lord from all the nations in their classroom. It's not unusual that a teacher might have kids from 15 or 16 different countries just in their own classroom. And so you can imagine for a Christian teacher that really wants their life to, their training, their education to be used in such a way that it's really meaningful to them, to have that mission field in your classroom and to also have the freedom and the encouragement to share your faith with those kids in a sensitive way and without force ever. How much more can you get than that as a teacher, that you could actually do this every day? I mean, for many of our teachers, it's like, how could I even consider doing anything else but this?
And when you recruit them and someone decides they're ready, I know some of the favorite times with NICS has been we used to call it PFO. Now it's called Impact. So what was that like in the early days? How did you start training after that first year when you had 5?
We realized that even though our schools are in English, they're American teachers, we're teaching an American curriculum, and some of the students are Americans, that when you move to a foreign country, it really is not the same. And it's very important to help these teachers prepare and to know what to expect. The differences will be when you relocate to an overseas assignment. And so we started what was then called PFO, Pre-Field Orientation, just as a way that we felt like we could help equip our teachers to be more effective overseas, to know what to expect. And our classrooms are filled with what we call third culture kids. And they are kind of a brand of their own. They have very unique qualities. And so a lot of this pre-field training is about understanding TCKs. So you know how they think, you know what their tendencies are, and you also know what their potential is, because the potential for TCKs is to make a huge impact.
Tell us what TCK is in case someone doesn't know.
Third culture kids. These are kids that during some of the major formative years of their growth, they grew up in a culture other than the passport that they hold or that their parents hold. And so missionary kids, business people's kids, all kinds of folks, the embassy staff kids. We live in a very global economy. So it used to be just the embassy kids and the major corporation kids that had operations overseas were the families that live overseas. Now it's so changed from that. You've got probably 5,000 Pakistani families that live in Seoul, Korea, and 5,000 Filipinos that live in Seoul, Korea, and 5,000 Bangladeshis that live in Seoul, Korea, and every other country in the world. A city like Seoul could easily have 200,000 what we call expatriates living in the city. They're running their Indian restaurants and their little businesses, and they work for other corporations as well. And so these are the kids that we have in our school. These are kids that they may look a certain way, but inside they're different. And so where they find their home base is the international school. When they're at the international school, all the other kids that look totally different from them relate to them and feel the same way they do. So this is where they feel at home. So for the teacher to teach and have an impact on these kinds of kids, you got to understand how they think and how they're different from other kids. So a lot of the training at Impact is on third culture kids. Then we have living overseas, cross-cultural living. We have education, how you prepare your lesson plans differently than you would if you were in Peoria. And when your kids come from 15 different countries and you're doing a lesson in your textbook called the Tennessee Valley Authority, do you teach that lesson at all? Or do you teach that lesson differently? We say you teach that lesson differently. the kid from India in your classroom and say, what project similar to this do you have in India? And let their report be about their home country. How do we do that? And then how about our host country? Does our host country have anything we could go on a field trip and see that's similar to this? And so it's as an educator, it's very different. And then one of the other tracks is what we would call a psychological track, but we don't want it to sound like it's something scary and a big barrier. But this is basically with the goal of teamwork. How God has made you as an individual. Do you know enough about yourself to know how you best fit into a team setting? Because the success of the team is the success of the ministry. And so this training is really key to helping people be successful in their overseas experience.
That's very fascinating. And if someone's listening and they're thinking, I might want to check this out. Maybe this is for me. How do they do this? Where should they go?
Yeah, we're mobilizing right now approximately 160 to 200 teachers a year. Mostly teachers. We do have a few other positions like administrators and guidance counselors and chaplains, but mostly teachers. At our website, NICS.org, NICS.org, there's a little tab on there called Career Opportunities. And so we list all those openings there. So anyone that's interested, can go there and check out and see what's available right now. But I would encourage anyone to apply anyway, even if they don't see an exact match for them. It's kind of a rolling type of listing so that things come up all the time. And there's even a place on there that you can click that says, if there's ever any opening in my area, then we'll send them a notice that there's an opening in their area. So I would encourage everyone to do that. There's no pat answer for any specific school, so you can talk to a specific recruiter that works with a specific school, down the road a little ways once you've got your application in process. Our positions do not typically require someone to raise full support. Some of our positions don't require any raising of mission support. They're fully salaried. And then others of our schools are still struggling some, and so they may ask the teacher to raise a minimal amount of support, so they can go overseas. But we've tried to eliminate the necessity of raising support to be able to do this. So most of the folks that do raise support with us raise a fairly minimal amount.
So if someone's really scared, looking back on your experiences, when you just said yes, what do you say to somebody that's maybe just fearful of the unknown?
Well, we live in a day when we've had terrorist attacks all over the place, including our own country. There's really no safe place. And I heard somebody say many, many years ago that the safest place for a Christian to be is in the will of God. And I do believe that's true. But I also think it's true that God never guaranteed his people safety. Matter of fact, anybody that really fully gives their life to Christ really needs to give, I'm only going to the safe places. The Great Commission doesn't say, go into all the safe places and preach the gospel to every creature. What we need to know is that our safety is in God's hands. And if he chooses to allow something to happen to our life, it's all in his plan. And, anywhere where you serve God, I believe you need to say, I can pray for safety. It's not wrong to pray for safety. But we don't live in a safe world. And even our own neighborhoods aren't all that safe anymore. And the truth is, I think when you're all in with Jesus, then you have to say that I can pray for safety, but it can't be a requirement to serve God. that's something that we need to release and say we belong to him. And therefore, just like any other tragedy that might happen to Christians, those may happen to you too, and they may happen while you're serving. And that's part of the price of following in his name.
Yeah, that's good. There's no growth without getting out of your comfort zone. I know that for sure. And there's nothing like accepting the challenge that God lays before you, the call to go. So thank you so much for doing that 37 years ago, for just saying yes and going and not digging in your heels the whole time, but just saying, hey, okay, God, I'm open. And then now look back. How do you feel just looking back on these 37 years? I can't even imagine what that would feel like.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When people say, did you ever think that something would come like this? When God gave me the vision for this ministry, I saw a lot more than we've seen so far. People expect the opposite answer. It's like, no, I never had any idea it would grow this big. But the way God put me together, I'm like, why is it taking so long? We have a whole world to reach. And we don't have time for things like retirement. We just redirect ourselves into God's working in this world. And so I look back and I just say it's all grace and it's all him. And I wonder what I've done to keep it from growing like it should have. So I continue to ask myself those questions. Is God fully doing everything he wants to do? I don't want to be in the way of that. And sometimes, I feel like he could do so much more if I was a better steward of what he's given me to do. So that's how I see it.
Well, so we've definitely been challenged today to think about, our own lives. So I encourage you, if you're listening at all, to check out NICS.org. You can see all the different countries the schools are in. You can see more on the history of NICS, and definitely contact someone there today. The placement coordinators are amazing, and they'll be able to answer your questions. And if you're listening and you've been inspired to give, do that. Don't hesitate, because there's nothing more important than serving the kingdom and sharing Christ. And what inspires me so much is when we're able to share with one of these students in a school, you have no idea who that student's going to reach for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And so it's just giving some now is going to continue to give and give and give.
Maybe I can close with a little story. I had one of our administrators to send me an email that was forwarded from a student. And evidently this student had come up to this administrator and said, Mrs. Roots, can you tell me who started the school? And she said, well, why do you want to know? He said, this school has changed my life. His name is Nasser, and he's from a little country called Qatar. You probably heard of it during the Persian Gulf War time. But he said, my life has just changed because of the school, and I want to write whoever started the school and thank them. And so she gave him my email address, and he wrote me this letter, and it was just kind of amazing, because here is this young Arab man who came to Korea, went to an international school, heavily influenced by the teachers, came to know Christ as his Savior. And he wrote me his story, and then he closed his email with, he said, love, Nasser, and then in parentheses put, an Arab follower of Christ. And then he wrote under that, there are many of us. I don't know what Nasser will become. I don't know really what has happened to him. But we have children in these schools that are the children of business owners, that are children of diplomats. Most of these children come from influential families. They can go back to their home countries and do what many of us could never do. And so to me, it's exciting to think that we don't even have to know what all the fruit is. We don't have to know what all the results are. But teachers faithfully serving in that classroom, there is magic there for the gospel. And I think we're going to have kids all in heaven that are going to come up to us and say, hey, because of you, and fill in the blank, and tell how their life was impacted for the gospel. And then maybe we'll get to hear how their life impacted others too in a big way.
Wow, so exciting, so fascinating. Be on the lookout for more podcasts coming from NICS. We're going to be traveling around to different schools and hearing stories from teachers on the field who have given up everything to go and serve Christ and to be a light in these little children's lives. And so there's more to come. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us today.
My privilege.
It has been awesome to hear the story. Bye-bye.